Roll call, please. Let the record show Supervisor Anita Johnson is out of the country, and Supervisor Alverman called me. He was a little ill earlier, so they will be excused this evening. At this time, we'll open it up to citizens' comments. Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Seeing none, citizens' comments are closed. Announcements of the chair. I just want to make one comment about the county fair. I was very impressed when I was out there on Sunday. I took my kids, and they're getting older, so it was one of the fewer things I get to do with them together, and we had a really good time. So for everybody who got out there and who participated, I appreciate it, and it was a job well done. That's all I have. Supervisor reports. Any supervisor reports? Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a number of items from Human Services. First, last week, the National Night Out was held at the Boys and Girls Club. It is an example of community stakeholders coming together for the betterment of our community to support youth and families. It's a collaborative effort between our gang prevention program, the Boys and Girls Club, the Kenosha Police Department, Community Impact Programs, and Jackpot Portables. We received donations from Jelly Belly, Target, the Kenosha Public Museums, and some local fast food restaurants. There were also some community resources on hand that were distributing information about their programs and services. Also, our Kenosha Gang Prevention movie nights are going extraordinarily well. There was some concern that one of the events was going to have to be canceled due to a performance license, but one of our business partners here, Jackpot Portables, stepped in and actually paid for the license so that could continue, so the movie could be shown. I want everyone to know that those community-based activities don't use any county levy funds, but they are funded by a state gang prevention grant as well as other grants and donations. The point in time count was held about, I want to say 3 weeks ago, conducted by the Kenosha Human Development Services and done with some of our Kenosha County service providers. The team I went with found a total of about 36 people. Prior to that, last month was the town hall meeting on jobs in the economy. Some of the information from that is available. Feel free to email me. I've got some of those PowerPoint presentations on hand. Prior to that town hall meeting, the committee took up a resolution regarding the staff of our job center. That resolution is actually before you tonight. Just so everyone is aware, the Human Services budget presentation will be in October at 5:30 p.m. on Thursday, October 18th. I'm letting you know that now because it's a joint meeting with the Human Services Board and will be held at the Job Center in the Commons area. Lori Staves will present the 2013 DHS budget via a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm sure, provided you missed that, we will be able to make that available to you. In fact, I have no doubts about that. Lastly, through our Kenosha County Office of Veterans Affairs, September 9th at 2 p.m. at Local 72 here in the city of Kenosha at 3615 Washington Road will be the World War II Veterans Memorial. The Pillars of Honor will be present. I believe Mr. Green emailed all of the county supervisors on this. If he's not, I will certainly have a conversation with him and get him to do that. Please let anyone that you know who is a veteran about this so that they can attend it and be part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Any other supervisor reports? Okay, seeing none.
County executive appointments. Edward Van Tyne to serve on the Kenosha County Land Information Council.
Refer to Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee.
John O'Day to serve on the Kenosha County Land Information Council.
Refer to Planning, Development, and Extension Education Committee.
New business resolution 38 from Finance Administration Committee to authorize sale and transfer of county tax deeded property to the Village of Twin Lakes. Approved by Rose, yes. Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Grady excused. Colmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move resolution number 38.
Resolution 38 is moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Rose.
The resolution before the board this evening authorizes us to do something that we have on many other occasions done with municipalities where there is a piece of tax deeded property which could go to better use in that particular municipality, in this case the Village of Twin Lakes. This particular property would be transferred to them via quitclaim deed, and they would use it for a public purpose. This is something that we have done on many other occasions, and the committee urges your support for this evening.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Any comments? Okay, the motion before you is res number 38. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion is passed.
Resolution 39 from Brookside Trustees, Human Services, and Finance Administration Committees, a resolution to adjust Brookside Care Center 2012 budgeted full-time equivalent nursing staff total to reflect minimum staffing level standards and ensure adequate nursing coverage. Board of Trustees, Pitts, yes. Kessler excused. Highland, yes. O'Day, yes. Nudo, yes. Human Service, Hallman, yes. Boyd Frederick, yes. And Johnson excused. Decker, yes. Arrington, yes. Montemiro, yes. Nudo, yes. Finance Administration, Rose, yes. Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Colmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes. Grady excused.
Thank you. Supervisor Hallman.
Move resolution 39.
Resolution 39 has been moved by Supervisor Hallman, seconded by Supervisor Montemiro. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a resolution to adjust Brookside Care Center's 2012 budgeted full-time equivalent nursing staff total to reflect current staffing level standards and ensure adequate nursing coverage. It was recently discovered that Brookside is short 8 hours on second shift and 24 hours short on third shift for budgeted nursing hours. Brookside still staffs the necessary hours, but because they are short on the budgeted FTEs, they have to fill in with extra hours and occasionally overtime and pool nurses, which are more costly. The correct amount of money is budgeted, but the FTEs need to be adjusted to reflect actual staffing. No additional nurses will be hired. Existing staff will have their positions increased. The Human Services and Finance Administration Committees and Brookside Board of Trustees have all approved this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Anybody wishing to speak on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion is passed.
Resolution 40 from Human Service Committee, a resolution to add 3 economic support specialists to Department of Human Services, Division of Workforce Development. Human Service, Hallman, yes. Boyd Frederick, yes. Anita Johnson, yes. Decker, yes. Arrington excused. Montemiro, yes. Nudo, yes. Finance Admin, Rose, yes. Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Colmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes. And Grady excused.
Thank you. Supervisor Hallman.
Move resolution 40.
Resolution 40 has been moved by Supervisor Hallman, seconded by Supervisor Boyd Frederick. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a resolution to add 3 economic support specialists to the Division of Workforce Development. The resolution before you this evening regards adding 3 economic support positions to the Division of Workforce Development in September of 2012. Adding the 3 positions in 2012 will add $50,000 to the Division of Workforce Development budget this year. $25,000 of this cost will be funded with income maintenance dollars, and the other $25,000 will be covered by levy from underspending within contracted services currently in the 2012 DWD budget. The request to add ES positions is made to meet new performance measures that have become part of the Income Maintenance Consortium contract with the state of Wisconsin, which was effective in January of 2012. Kenosha and Racine counties joined together as a consortium called WKRP, Wisconsin's Kenosha Racine Partners, on January 1st, 2012. The consortium has struggled to meet the new income maintenance performance requirements because of the significant growth in the income maintenance caseload, from 15,022 cases to 19,877 cases in Kenosha County alone between January of 2012 and July of 2012, a 25% increase in cases. If income maintenance performance benchmarks aren't met in 2012, the WKRP consortium could be placed on a corrective action plan by the state, and the state could even opt to take over the income maintenance functions, but would require our county levy as funding to be used for the income maintenance program. Both the Human Services and Finance Administration Committees have discussed this resolution at great length, particularly Human Services. I believe we spent almost an hour, if not even a little bit more time on this, and then unanimously approved the resolution to add the 3 economic support workers in 2012. I'm recommending that the resolution to add 3 economic support workers in 2012 be approved by the county board. And I would also like to add, having met some of the governor's cabinet secretaries, I can say with full and complete confidence that they do not play around. They will not hesitate to take this away from Kenosha County. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Holman. Seeing no lights. Are you pushing your Supervisor Molinaro? You should be live.
Okay. I'll request one more time that the supplier of this system be at a county board meeting, not here during the day trying to simulate what goes on here. They need to be here at a county board meeting. And personally, I give them 30 more days or they take their system back and refund our money. And I've asked repeatedly that we get up on this board the order in which we speak. It is important that this body see who is up on that board. That's been expressed by multiple supervisors in this room. It's been that way as long as I've been here. Well, that's not the case, but certainly from my vantage point, I could always see the board. It's important that we have that information. It's available. It was here initially. Get it back. The system is a wreck. We did talk about this at the Finance Committee. I had reservations. I asked a number of questions. Generally, the responses were at least at the time, pacified me to some extent. I was very hesitant to support this resolution in committee. And since last Thursday, I have not improved that position at all. I'm going to make a motion to send this back to committee, which I suggested we do at the Finance Committee, and I'm going to explain to you why I think we should be doing it. At the very meeting, I believe that you talked about these 3 new positions. If it wasn't at the meeting, it was the next meeting. You also talked about a $600,000 to $750,000 deficit collectively within Human Services. So I'm not sure how we talk about a deficit the first half of the meeting and adding 3 positions the second half of the meeting. This doesn't seem to make much sense to me. I also asked at that meeting, recognizing I came in late, at least the meeting that the deficit was talked about. Again, these could have been 2 meetings for Human Services. I asked the question about how we were going to address and what discussion the committee had had that evening or previous or had intended to have about covering that deficit, projected deficit. I don't believe there has been much discussion or any discussion certainly at that evening, at least none that I feel comfortable with. There was a question about how these calls were handled internally. I don't know that that's been fully answered with the current system that we have in place. I understand this didn't come up to my recollection on Thursday, but it's been brought up to me since, that there was some discussion about a certain portion of this mandated delivery system that we have from the state, that the state is not fulfilling a portion of their role currently, which we are in fact doing with our workers. So when that changes, when they do finally pick up and carry their full burden, what is that going to do to our workload? Are we still going to need these 3 positions? We're talking about $50,000 in the 2012 budget, which we hear repeatedly every budget year. We're going to hear it again in the matter of less than 60 days, how tight these budgets are. yet we have $50,000 available to cover the rest of the year. But again, it isn't just the 50,000 or the 25, because it's 25 levy dollars that we're going to find because we happen to have available $25,000 within our budget somewhere. But it's going to be $150,000 in 2013. I pointed that out at the committee as well. We have less than 60 days before we see the budget. I want to have a much better picture across the board who else is asking for positions. We're talking about 3 in one department right now. What other employee staffing level changes are we talking about? How does this affect the 2013 budget collectively, not department by department, 60 days or less prior to this county board receiving the budget? I believe this county executive gives his budget address the first part of October. Is that right? The committees take up the ball at that point in time. So we're not even 60 days away from having this thing, which means we have a pretty solid handle today on what positions we're going to be looking for. I just think the timing of this isn't right, and again, I'm going to stress that I'm not convinced that the questions are being asked. I really believe, and I said this to someone I spoke to today, that if they'd have asked for 10 positions, I believe the committee would have gone along with it. I have some reservations about that. We can say all day long that I met this cabinet member or that cabinet member, and boy, do they mean business. Well, you know what? I have a real hard time believing the state wants to take this program over, and that they're just going to step in and automatically do it. One would suspect that they're going to do everything in their power to put Kenosha County on notice. And one thing I can guarantee you, they can have be wearing shirts with the sleeves cut off because they're such brawn and bulk and power. They are not going to respond in 60 days or less. So my motion is to refer this back to Human Services Committee with the intention of having a better picture countywide of what we're talking about for the number of positions that we're talking about bringing on board. I so move.
It's been moved and seconded to send this back to the Human Services Committee. Anybody wishing to speak? Supervisor Rose?
All right, thank you. This was much debated before the Finance Committee, and I'm not speaking against the proposition here this evening, but I am concerned that we are setting here a precedent that I think all too often has been the past precedent, and not a particularly good precedent to be adding new employees toward the end of the fiscal year, which we are currently in, of 2012. We pass this evening. We assume that in 2013 this will certainly be part of the budget at a much higher budget figure. But that isn't necessarily the primary concern. Is what does this do with respect to the overall requests of other departments? What are their needs? I know, for example, in the circuit court and the family court, for example, there has been complaints that they are understaffed because of the increased number of filings of divorces and restraining orders. The staff there has complained to me that they're short-staffed. I don't know about other departments. What is the big picture here? I understand there's a need in this particular department. They brought forward the resolution. Other departments didn't. Will they be bringing forth their resolutions in the future? I don't know. I don't know what the staffing level request may or may not be, and I don't think we've set any priorities. The only way you can do that is to take a look at the larger picture, which is my concern here this evening. And I say I'm not speaking against these particular three, but the object here is not to put this into effect till September anyway. The budget is coming through in October. Is the county executive going to include these in his budget in the event that it wasn't passed this evening? Would this be part of the 2013 2013 budget. The executive knows what the overall picture is and will review all of the department requests. I assume there will be some sort of department requests. Whether they will make it to the board or not is to be seen. Priorities have to be set, and I think this should be one of those priorities. Certainly the Finance Committee hasn't set any priorities. I don't have any inside information to convey to you that the requests from other departments are X or Y, but I am concerned, how does this fit into the larger picture of priorities, which I think is an important consideration and public policy issue for us to deal with. So that's why I'm going to support this resolution this evening, hoping that it not be construed as necessarily in opposition to the request for 3. I don't believe that there is the kind of sense of urgency that was spoken to the committee about. I don't see it as that urgent a proposition to act for the committees to once again take a look at some of the things that I've suggested here on priorities and what is the overall request of all of the departments here for new staff for the coming year. Thank you.
Anything else, Supervisor Rose?
No.
I had to push your button. Supervisor Decker.
Thank you, Chairman. And I just want to point out with my remote, when I press the request to speak button, the light lights up, and then a couple seconds later it turns off. So I don't know if that makes a difference. I'm in support of the motion to refer it to committee. In the Human Services Committee, we brought it up on September 25th, and we did have a lengthy discussion, and there were questions, many questions that were asked and were answered. And I know several of us approved or voted yes on this, very thought hard about it, and it was a tough decision, and we didn't vote on this lightly. And then we had another Human Services meeting on October 7th, and that's when we were told that the Human Services budget is approximately $700,000 in the hole. So for us, 1 week to be asking to be voting on approving 3 more positions, and then 1 week later being told we're $700,000 in the hole, you'd think that that would have come up when they were asking for 3 more positions. And in the time that, since the September 25th Human Services meeting, I have had thoughts and concerns and have discussed it with various people, and I still have concerns and would prefer it to be referred to Human Services Committee so we can get those concerns answered. And that's why I support Supervisor Molinaro's motion, and I would like to see it referred back to the Human Services Committee so we can get a few more questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Vice Chair Kubicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was at all the committee meetings. I was at the Human Service meeting and obviously at the Finance meeting, and I think these positions were well vetted in both of those committees. The state, according to the state model, we should have 47 positions in place to fill the needs of our county in this consortium. We currently have 33. We're asking for 3 more, not 14 more. 3 more, not 14 more. The caseload, as mentioned by Supervisor Hallman, has increased by 25%. I think that says something right there, that more people are calling to use and need these services, which this county offers in these dire times. And I say we do not turn our backs on these people when they need us most. In human services, that's where they need us most, I believe. And I'm not going to support the referral. I think we could pass this thing tonight. There's no increase to the 2012 county levy. I understand there's the $50,000 will come, half of it from the state, half of it will come from us through efficiencies of the Department of Human Services. I think we have to think long and hard and think about the people that this particular department services when we make a decision here. No increase in levy. You're helping people that need it the most for this year. Now, if next year it comes up that we have more of a downfall or deficiencies in monies, we'll have to vet it then. But let's deal with the problems we have at hand right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kubicki. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm against referring this back to committee, and perhaps I should make a couple of things clear. First of all, we are in this pickle, so to speak, because this is something that we used to do incredibly well. We were able to use some federal funds to reduce the amount of tax levy required to run our income maintenance. However, in the last budget from the state of Wisconsin, the governor saw fit to take this away from the counties of Wisconsin and give it to HP. And when the budget came out, everybody said, who is HP? They didn't know who it was. Turns out HP is the same people that are making computers and printers. The reason why we're in this pickle is because HP couldn't handle it and had to give it back. So the state said, I guess we'll give a portion of it back to the counties and see how this works. So the state's been goofing around with this. That's why we have the problem that we have right now. This is something that we used to do remarkably well. I do want to stress that if the state were to come and take over our program, as the state has done with Milwaukee County's programs, that we would still be required to provide county levy. That doesn't change. That's still something that we have to do. Even if we chose not to act on this and just table it, to just kill it, we would still be required to put tax levy towards this. So with those two things in mind, I'm against sending it back to committee. And I'll say a third thing too. As far as the staffing issue goes, we do not know. We don't have a magic crystal ball to know what the next year and the year after is going to bring. We're a county, we're an arm of state services. We do not know what they are going to decide to do. We don't even know that what's proposed will even pass and how that's going to affect us. Unless you have some sort of, like I said, crystal ball where you can see that, you don't know. Certainly Ms. Green is here to answer our questions. I believe one of the questions that was in committee was in adding these folks, if the state picks up and does what it's supposed to do, will we continue to need these people? And I believe the response was most likely not. But certainly Ms. Green is here to answer any questions folks have about this. This isn't something we should send back to committee or take lightly. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Supervisor Molinaro.
This does need to go back to committee. And the more I listen to it, the more I realize that it has to go back to committee. If this was such an important issue to discuss and to put the state on notice, as we heard at the Finance Committee meeting, that they're not carrying their load, they're not doing their fair share, they're not funding as they need to fund, they're simply giving us another mandate, I'd ask this board to listen to the minutes from the Executive Committee meeting. This was not brought up once with our legislators, and they were all here in the same room. Instead, we just let the senator bash the other side of how things aren't getting done, and they're not being cooperative, and they're not willing to go back into session, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where was that conversation? I don't recall what I heard listening to anybody ask them about the fact that they're mandating us to do something, and the list is long of mandates that the state asks us to do. Yet we're going to ignore the deficit. You just talked about this was vetted and discussed thoroughly. These three positions that you want to add was discussed more thoroughly than a $600,000 deficit. don't have any more room on my answering machine to take these types of approaches to county board business. It's time we get busy. It's time we set an agenda, and it's time we get something done. Instead, we're going to come forward, we're going to add 3 positions. Again, 45 days ahead of the budget coming out. It just doesn't make sense to me. It needs to go back to committee, and there needs to be discussion. And I'll make this point again this evening. Discussion isn't an hour to an hour and a half ahead of the county board meeting. Get the Human Services Committee, one of the 2 largest overall components of Kenosha County's $250+ million budget, off of the county board evening. And give yourselves time to discuss these issues. Send it back to committee. Again, I'm saying so that we understand collectively what we are facing in the county. What other departments are looking for positions? Where are we going to be able to cut? How are we going to answer this deficit issue? You can't come forward with facing a deficit and say we're going to add 3 positions and worry about it later. And you passed up an opportunity to have a serious discussion with every one of our legislators. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, all of these things were discussed at the committee, and, you know, there was a discussion about whether we should do it, not do it, but the big reason why we're having to do it is because the state passed the responsibility down to us. We all know that, okay? And they said, you guys can do it better than us, but you can pay for it too. And that's what they did. So now we got a department, and picture this, yeah, you're a client, you're maybe on food stamps, you're on something, and you don't get any answers from anybody, and you call a number, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and then you hang up, and then maybe you get a call, maybe you'll get an answer to your question, maybe you won't. And I understand there's a supervisor that voted for this tonight that did call that number. I didn't myself, because I believed them. We decided at the committee that we would obviously all we're doing is funding it till the end of the year. That's all we're doing, because the county exec's going to have to come in with his budget, and when he comes in with his budget, those will be there, and then you can decide whether you want to do it or not. In the meantime, we're sitting here with a social service department, and believe me, I didn't get the feeling that they were happy to have to be there, who's got a problem. So if we refer this back, okay, then all we're going to do is say it's never going to go through, and you're going to have to live with it to the end of the year, and then maybe the state will come in and take over, and maybe they won't. But I think we talked about it at the committee. The committee voted unanimously at that time. In fact, Supervisor Molinaro was going to make an amendment that we make it for 3 months, and it was decided that this would happen with the county exec's budget. That would automatically happen. At the end of the year, this year, you'll be able to decide whether you want to put those 3 positions in. In the meantime, you know, I think we should go ahead and vote against this referral and support this thing and give the people at social service what they need. This is not an easy job over there. So let's do what we said at committee, and let's not refer this back, and let's act on it tonight, and then we can decide whether we want to do this for the next year at budget time. Please don't refer this back, because these people need help over there. They're not coming to ask us because they wanted to, believe me. So let's not refer this back. Let's vote against the referral, and let's get on with this thing, and then we'll decide at the end of the year whether we're going to keep doing it or not.
Thank you, Supervisor Frederick. Supervisor Decker.
I just want to point out that people talk about that this money is coming from the state, from the income maintenance. We have approximately $1.5 million that we are going to have to find, not this budget, the next budget, for income maintenance that we are not going to be able to get from the state. So for people to say that this is coming from the state in the income maintenance, we are going to have to find $1.5 million. So just a thought, when you're thinking, oh, it's from the state, it's free money, we're going to have to find that money next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Boyd Frederick.
Through the chair, if Ms. Green would take, if I could ask her a question?
Certainly. Adelaide? Well, you're going to have to talk real loud because you're on her.
What did the
You're good to go.
So these were things that were added since the last budget that we have to do, that we were not prepared for at the start of last October, correct? We didn't know this was coming and what standards were going to be set, correct? So we're doing this to basically avoid a penalty from the state of Wisconsin for standards the state of Wisconsin set for us.
Thank you, Supervisor Frederick. Supervisor Skalitsky.
Mr. Chairman, as I previously have stated, I rely on the committees to thoroughly vet issues out so that the small minutia of details can be understood by the rest of us. And likewise, I try to do the same thing on my committees. I appreciate everything Supervisor Molinaro has said, his concerns, although I'm looking at the recorded vote tally. There seems to be some uncertainty about how these votes are going. So right now, my position is I do support the resolution to put this back into committee because I think there's too many questions that still remain, of which I still have some. If we're talking about a deficit of 600,000 or 700,000, that seems to be a roaming number, of which I wasn't even aware of. Why would we certainly start adding to that? So I think that some further discussion and understanding is not unreasonable. I think it was already, and I'll probably just repeat what was previously stated, there's concern that the state might act to remove or revoke some of these responsibilities from the county if we don't hit these standards, whether arbitrary or not, are met. But yet they're not in a position to do so. And I do concur with Supervisor Molinaro. I'd love to see the state actually move in 60 days on anything. So I'm not too worried about them coming in and ripping this away from us, because that would just be increasing their burden. They're not trying to do that. Some questions that I have is, why is the caseload going up 25%? And it isn't just because of the bad economy. Something else is in play there, which I don't think, well, I certainly don't know what the answer is there. I hope that the committee will learn that or figure out what that is. The state assumed some responsibility, tried to give this to a private contractor, realized they were not going to be capable of performing to the level that the expectations were set at, and then gave it back to the county. As far as I know, I don't, once again, I don't know all the details of DHS. I don't know if staffing had been cut because that requirement had been taken away, yet it's given back, and now we need more bodies. Although the citizens and taxpayers of Kenosha County deserve help and support, I don't think it's unreasonable for somebody to have to wait on hold for 20 or 30 minutes or 45 minutes. I've done it myself when I'm calling a private company about service or another government agency. It's not like they have to run out and get to work. So if they're not being helped within 20 minutes, but we're not meeting the state standard, then I hope that calls attention to the state, to our situation. Because maybe then they'll recognize that we're not getting the support or the money that's required to adequately fulfill the obligations that they put upon the county. So because there's so many questions, and now there seems to be committee members that are not supporting it, I do support the resolution, put this back to committee for further discussion, and I hope that it can be thoroughly vetted out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I don't support sending this back to committee, but before I make this next motion, in the event that it does come back, I certainly hope that you all are there. I really do, since you have so many questions and so many concerns. Because the first time that this was on the agenda, it was the only agenda item. It actually delayed town hall by about 10 or 15 minutes because we were still discussing it, still asking questions, and still getting information. So hopefully this time, saying so many of you are so passionate about this matter, you'll be present in the event that it comes back to committee, which I certainly do not support it doing. Thank you. With that, a motion to call the question.
Sure, speak your point of information. Corporation Counsel. Okay, well, I'm not going to allow him to close the question. Supervisor Molinaro.
The reason issues like this have to go back to committee is, as I've explained previously, but again, since the point's been made, and I appreciate the invitation to show up, I understand there's a significant deficit in another, potentially significant deficit, in yet another department here in Kenosha County, which is the Sheriff's Department. So if you just add up those two deficits between Human Services and the Sheriff's Department, of which the Finance Committee had no idea, seems to me there might be a little bit more opportunity here to share information. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. All right, at this point, I'm going to speak on this this topic. I'm kind of amazed by some of the discussion here. If our roads weren't getting plowed and you got people screaming into your phone to get those plowed, would you act? I think you would. Okay, we've got people who need our help. I don't care if they're sitting there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 2 hours. They're troubled, and they need our services. Okay, this is something that we can't just shrug our shoulders to and send back to committee. I sat through both committee meetings. I asked questions myself, and I thought that the responses were very good, and I thought the issues were vetted. So, and to some of you who say, well, the heavy lifting is done in the committees, yeah, it is. And both committees supported that. And I've heard nothing since then that changes my mind. We're sitting here and we're having a debate on what the next year's budget's going to be. That's not what we should be doing. Next year's budget, believe me, everybody through the press and through people we know understands what we're looking to do next year in the budget. Right now we're addressing a need. We've got 33 people answering phones in a consortium with Racine, who has 43 people answering phones. Both models are supposed to be up to 47. And we're 10th out of 10 consortia in the state. It's serving our citizens. That's troubling. Troubling. If you were one of the people that needed service and wanted that phone answered, it would bother you. So I'm not calling fire here and pretending there's an issue there's not. And we can point fingers and look at all different things. But right now, this is something that we can fix through our current budget. The people need this help now. I'm sure we'll have quite a number of issues during next year's budget. And the only thing I'm going to say about that is please go to the committees and participate. Because I don't want to be having these blowout debates on the county board floor when we should be vetting this stuff in committee. I'm really troubled by this, the way this has went. I haven't heard any pinpoint reasons to send this back to committee. I do not know what the committee is going to ask. That she's here right now. If you've got a question, ask. I mean, to spend another hour on this in a committee and delay helping these people that need our services, I can't do that. I can't do that. So, at this point, I guess we have somebody else who wants to speak. You?
I was at that committee meeting, and our numbers were bad compared to everyone else. Our performance numbers looked bad. And I was concerned about spending the money too, but I realized the volume is what they explained to me was so bad that our performance looked bad. So I also asked that maybe like in 3 months after these new people on board, we could see it again. So I was comfortable letting them hire these people because we really were failing. Our numbers were the worst in all of the consortium, and that concerned me as well. So I do not think going back to committee will change that. I think getting them help will change that. However, I do want to see the numbers again in 3 months because, as Supervisor Decker said, we may be able to do this more efficiently. There was a consortium in Milwaukee that handled cases boom, 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 very quick. And I was wondering if they had a better phone service. So I do expect them to work on this, but I think they could use the extra hands. So I do not support going back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Through the Vice Chair to Ms. Green, if I may ask a question. Could you tell us how long you've had the system and how long you've had a chance to get the system up and running?
I believe we have provided more than enough latitude here that we need to keep this discussion on, specifically on the issue of referral.
Supervisor Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I will try to stay on referral. For those of you that have not sat through a budget season yet, you will find out quickly that any positions added now will not be removed from the budget coming into the new season. It's very difficult to take them out of the budget once we have them in there. If you were going to try to put them in for 3 months and then try to remove them, I don't think that that's going to work either. It's just very difficult to take people out once you have them in there, unless it's a position that is actually expiring from a grant. So I think that there are still some issues that need to be discussed on this, and I'm going to support this to send it back to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bruning. Chairman Gantz.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. A lot of latitude was given in other supervisors' comments in all different issues. So, getting back to it again, next year's budget is not what we're debating here. We're debating finishing out this year. I understand positions are tough to remove, but I think everybody, including the county executive, has heard what we're looking to do. As a matter of fact, he had a press release that suggested in concert with us what we should see, okay? So I don't think that we're going to come in with a zero budget with 3 people on top of it and have to vote on that, all right? That's not what's before us. What's before us right here is helping the people that need the help now. Please focus on that. And I don't see what this is going to, sending it back to committee. I sat through an hour and a half to 2 hours of debate on 2 different committees where all kinds of questions were asked and answered. So to sending it back is a delaying tactic, worrying about next year's budget that is not really pertinent to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anybody else wishing to speak? Supervisor Rose.
Okay, I did press the button, but all right. My question is this: how can we finance this position in this year when, if you look at what was left on your desk here, we are going to show a human services deficit of at least, according to this, $595,975, best case scenario, or worst case scenario of $750,000. Where is that money going to come from this year?
Is that all?
Yes.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Anybody else wishing to speak? Supervisor Skalitsky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. One thing I want to reemphasize is we are talking about 3 positions here, but it is in addition to this year's budget, of which there seems to be a deficit spending. It is not as though people are not getting helped. They are getting helped. What is at hand here is, are they getting helped fast enough to meet either the state standards or our own self-imposed standards? And I'm not sure that we've imposed them. It sounds to me as though the state has. And that is why it needs to go back to committee, and I support that resolution, because that needs to be clarified. Let's not turn this into an emotional issue as though there are people out in the streets not getting assistance. They are. It's just how timely are they? Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Skalitsky. Anybody else?
Through the chair, I'd like Dave Geertsen or Mr. Jansen to come up and address that issue that was just made by Supervisor Skalitsky and Supervisor Rose. Go ahead.
Human Services deficit.
Yes.
Yes, please.
That was to just some of the divisions within the department. If you look at it as in a holistic way, at this point, it looks like they should come close to making up the deficit or even possibly exceed it. One is they should get a surplus in a thing that we call indirect costs. We discussed that in committee and vetted that out. Another one is when we allocate, we're expecting a health insurance surplus. When we allocate that back to the departments, Brookside and the Fund 200, where most of human services, that'll generate a surplus. And also Brookside's generating a surplus. So if you take it, look at its totality, it's really pretty close to break even right now.
Thank you, Mr. Gersten. Supervisor Rose, you have the floor.
Well, I mean, I understand that answer, but the fact of the matter is this is showing a human services deficit, and all the finance director is really saying is we can get the money elsewhere and apply it here. I don't think that is the way the budget is organized. We don't take all of the money and just dump it into one big fund and then dole it out. We have these organized by departments and line items for a purpose. And now what the department director is saying here is we'll get it from someplace else. Well, you can do that. It still doesn't answer the question, how can you finance the position when you're running a large deficit? That is relevant. In order to be good stewards of the money, you've got to pay for these things. You're not serving people here, addressing their needs when you can't finance the position. You're just kidding yourself.
Is that all, Supervisor
Yes.
Rose? Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
Call the question.
Question's been called and seconded. Roll call's been requested. Before you is the referral back to committee.
Call the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. My fault. Close the question. Okay. The roll call's been called. 2/3 majority. Just- Press confirm after you pushed. There you go. Yeah, you got it. Passes.
Okay, the motion before you is to refer back to committee.
A second, you can't vote yet.
Hold on.
You can't vote that fast.
Okay, it fails. Fails going back to committee, so now on the motion itself. Supervisor Molinaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will vote against this resolution tonight. I believe this is just bad policy. I even brought up at the committee, at the Finance Committee, if you recall, we had before us a meeting or two ago, I think it was 2 meetings ago, to make some changes to the health insurance that was afforded to part-time nurses. And I had the explanation for it, but again, it all just comes back to maybe a little bit better planning or something. But, then it's a couple of meetings later, we have a resolution on the agenda to go ahead and change the position, which is number 39 on tonight's agenda. So we've already gone through that one. No.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. So this again is the point I'm making here. I probably should have voted against this at committee, and I didn't. You talk about, we go through this deficit, or I should call it the general fund estimated at the Finance Committee on a regular basis. All we can do is make our decisions on the best available information at the time. And at this time, we are looking at a best case scenario, or an expected, to use the term on the sheet here, deficit in 2 divisions of $1.1 million. Or worst case scenario, or on this sheet, a negative of nearly $1.8 million. So if that's in fact what you're looking at, I don't know how we can say this evening, with the information that is before us, that adding 3 positions with money in a very, very tight 2012 budget, exclusive of the deficit projection, makes good sense. We get taxpayer after taxpayer after taxpayer coming in here. We went through this whole budget levy limit recommendation. It wasn't even passing a budget. It was a conversation about the expectation going into the budget cycle, the budget effort. And we were taken to task for talking about anything that wasn't a zero or a cut. So as soon as that dust settles, here we are on the board floor looking to add positions that'll be $150,000 plus next year. And we're saying things like, it's only 50% funded by the levy, the rest of it is coming from some other source. Well, some other source still comes out of the taxpayers' pockets of Kenosha County. We were told that the federal grant, or the federal dollars that we can draw from, there is no limit. Well, quite honestly, I don't want to be a part of that either. If that just doesn't scream, here's what our problem is, and then we take the opportunity to have the conversation with our state legislators and we ignore it, but we come to this body and say, pass it, add the 3 positions, ignore everything you heard back when we were talking about a 1.5% bump to the levy for the 2013 budget, ignore all of that argument why that wasn't such a good idea, but add these 3 positions. Well, do you think if that would have made the paper, or had press coverage, or a news release like some of these, like the budget levy issue did, do you think the chamber would have had 0 citizen comments tonight? Somehow I doubt it. Right on the heels of this discussion over the levy limit, I don't believe that would have been the case. I'm not going to add 3 positions without having additional conversation countywide, how this affects the 2013 budget, who else is looking to add positions, who's looking to cut positions, where does this fit into the bigger picture? It's just good fundamental planning. I don't add staff at my office for one project without understanding long-term what that's going to do to the bottom line. That's all I'm asking you to do here. I asked for it at committee. I didn't believe I had the support of the committee. I had at least one, if not two afterwards, say, geez, if I'd have known that's where you were going to go, I probably would have went the same way. Well, here's your opportunity. Say no. Let's figure out bigger picture what this means to Kenosha County, what it means to the specific department, what it means to the specific program. Here's a chance to have some conversations again. What's the state going to do to help us out? How many times have we said on this board floor, we're going to tell the state to pound salt? At some point in time, you really got to tell them. And you had every one of them in the room and the opportunity to do it. And we decided we just would rather let them bash one another. Sorry I listened to any of that tape. Thankful I didn't go to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Decker.
I, like Supervisor Molinaro, will be voting against this resolution. On the October 2nd meeting of the Human Services, I requested it to be brought back to the agenda for the following meeting because I had more questions. Obviously, it got brought to this board floor to be voted on this evening. I had hoped that we would have brought it up in the meeting before it got brought to the board floor. Obviously, it didn't, so I'm voting against it because I have questions, they haven't been answered, and apparently that's okay, but not with me, so that's why I'm voting no.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Montemuro.
This is not adding a brand new idea or a new department or some new idea. This is taking the situation right now because the economy's so bad. There are more people that need entrance into our process. That's why their caseload went up. So actually, this is just filling a deficit because there's more people we need to care for. If this was someone coming in and asking for a brand new position, a new grant for something or blah, 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 you don't do that when you have a deficit. But our responsibility is still to take care of these people. And the reason the volume's so big is they're suffering. So they clearly showed us they are failing in taking care of them number-wise. I will repeat, we were the worst in the state. So I do not feel bad about allowing them to have the extra people. And I know in 3 months when I want the review, I'm not talking to fire one of them. I want to see improvement. You know, I'm giving them accountability in 3 months to show me that those numbers are better. So I feel very strongly that this is our responsibility. This is not frivolous spending of money. This is fixing our deficit, and that's what we're supposed to be spending on. We have to find a way to balance the budget where it can be cut and not hurt our people that are in trouble, and they're in trouble because of the economy. So this goes along with the 0% levy. You know, we are stuck right now. People are suffering. We're all suffering. So I strongly suggest that you vote for this.
Thank you, Supervisor Hero. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Ms. Green, if I may ask a question. My question before was, how long have you had to get this program up and running?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. We've had approximately 9 months to get this program up and running. About 3 months of planning prior to the implementation date of January 1, and the program itself started effective January 1, and we've got about 7 months worth of information that shows us how not so well we're doing. We've tried many different things before coming before you to ask for these additional positions. We have, excuse me, redeployed the staff that we have in various assignments in hopes that this would improve our performance, and it has not significantly improved our performance. And all of the things being factored in, we've come to the conclusion that we simply need more bodies. To receive 4,800 additional cases in 6 months and not increase the staffing levels, we are facing a big challenge, and that's why we're asking for these 3 additional positions. And these are, I just like to speak on the caseloads themselves. Many of these are poor working families. They are not people who are sitting at home doing nothing. I'd like to make that clear. Another large percentage of our cases are elderly people who are in institutions or in family care. Some are blind, some are disabled and unable to work. So it's a whole combination of citizens of this county that are accessing these benefits. And I believe they are entitled to timely and accurate benefits.
During the first 3 months that you were planning this, did you look at the other consortiums and talk to them about how they do their systems?
You are now.
We talked to them, and they talked to us, and we also talked to the state. And we tell the state that this is a struggle for all of us. We compare notes all the time. The state, as I said in Human Services, made a lot of promises in terms of how the system was going to work for all of us. And there's been many system failures. And the state continues to say, we're working on it, we're working on it, we're working on it. But while they're working on it, we still have to try to meet the performance. They don't give us a break on that. And we have to try to deliver benefits to people in as timely a fashion as we possibly can. There are many system failures every single day. The technology that was promised to us is not working the way that it was presented to us. So it's an ongoing challenge every single day, and the volume keeps coming.
Is there an opportunity for people to walk in instead of calling?
I should explain, because this is not just call center. Call center is one of the issues. We have staff in about 5 different areas. We have taken the few staff that we have and placed them in various components. We're not quite fully staffed, but we have staff in Western County, 3 of them, that handle the cases or the people that live in the western end of the county. We have, and I'm speaking just Kenosha, I'm not speaking for Racine because they have comparable staff. We have about 10 of our FTEs who are in the call center, and Racine has approximately 12 in the call center, so a combination of 22. We've got about 10 other staff that are in what we call the ongoing unit that are seeing people in person, people who come through the doors in person. The phone calls are one aspect, the people who come in are another aspect. We have a whole nother unit of 5 people who deal with the elderly, the blind, the disabled, and the institutional care cases. And we have another person who deals with the system problems. She's communicating with the state on a daily basis when something doesn't work correctly. And so we've got staff in many different arenas trying to address the issues that we have. They're not all call center people.
Is there an opportunity for cross-training of some of these people that are in there?
Yeah, I know.
In the call center?
Cross-train, whatever is needed. Correct. Because when the call center gets bogged down, we look at the queue every single day. The management team looks at the queue, and then when it surpasses a certain number and the wait time is a certain length, that we pull other people off of their assignments. If they're not with a client specifically at that point in time, that we ask them to get on the phone so that the call time can go down. And so every day we're just managing staff. We're putting them wherever the greatest need is. No, the Western County caseload itself, I believe they have about 1,200 cases each. The Western County caseload by itself is about 3,600 people, and so they have their hands full just dealing with that caseload.
People in Kenosha County, are they addressing the Racine phone calls too? Is it just?
Yes, we're addressing all calls that come in from Kenosha or Racine. And I would venture a guess and say it's about half and half. I don't know off the top of my head, but I would venture a good guess that it's about half and half. Because our caseloads are very similar. We have approximately 20,400 cases that reside in Kenosha. They have approximately 22,000 that reside in Racine. But they're combined together. That's the purpose of having a consortia, that a person can call in and they can be served by either Racine or Kenosha, irregardless of where they live. No, there is no way to get, other than to let the state do it. That's the only way to get out, let the state do the consortia.
It's over. The reason why I say that is Eileen is telling us that the system is so screwed up that they are constantly on the phone with the state trying to figure out how they're going to fix the software, how they're going to fix the system. Is that correct? If the state's not going to fix it on their end, why would they want to take it back? And I'll tell you, as a person who struggles every single day to try to keep myself and my own children out of the system, I don't think that adding 3 more positions is going to be the answer. I think telling the state that they can take it back is going to be the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bruning. I apologize for passing the gavel back to Chairman Gentz when we first started this discussion and he spoke, so it was my fault and I apologize. I do have the gavel now. I'll hold the gavel through this resolution. Chairman wishes to speak. Thank you.
Just in a little bit of a response to that, I understand what a lot of what is being said here, but I still think that, you know, these questions were asked in committee. The committee passed it unanimously, both committees, and I do think that's where the questions are asked and the legwork is done. I mean, if things come to light afterwards, certainly there's an opportunity to do that. But I can, other than Supervisor Montemuro, I just want to go back to the fact that we're trying to help the people of our county here. And you can poo-poo that all you want. But when they call in, they have an issue. I mean, they're taking the time to call in. And, you know, to sit here and worry about how next year's budget's going to come in before they've started their budget hearings, yeah, I understand they got an idea of where it's coming in, but we're all looking at the same number. And that's not pertinent to this. There are deficits and struggles that are out there with the 2012 budget, but this is an issue that we're dead last in helping our constituents. Doesn't that bother anybody? Dead last in helping our constituents. Okay.
Is that all?
Yes. Looks like Supervisor Rose.
Supervisor Rose, you have the floor.
Yes. In the best of times and in the worst of times, Kenosha County has never had the kind of problems that have been articulated at committee or this evening with the Department of Human Services. Services were given, and we didn't have these kinds of complaints. But now that we're combined with Racine, we seem to be overwhelmed with work. Now, the one conclusion I can come to is that the consortium is not the answer for us. It's one thing to address our constituents and the people in Kenosha County. It's another thing for us to address the Racine issues. And I don't really know, we didn't get a real response, accurate numbers as to the breakdown. Those were estimates, but I do know this, that in the past we haven't had these kind of service complaints that we are hearing this evening. So if we are going to pass this resolution, I think we should amend it in two ways. One, that we specifically address some of the issues that we've talked about this evening, and I understand we can do that in the 2013 budget. But I think if we focus our attention on, does this improve performance or not, and take a look at those kinds of issues, is it really needed? And also focus on drafting a resolution that I would urge the Human Services Committee to bring forward on this issue of requesting the state to terminate this idea of consortium. We never had these problems before. And this is not the first time that Kenosha County has had high unemployment. If you recall the substantial factory closings over the years, we have seen bad times before in this community, and nobody came forward and said that we were not addressing the problem. So I think that part of the problem here is this consortium idea. We have two administrations operating two different programs. We're a consortium, but we are set up to operate as individual departments. So I cannot see continuing with this consortium idea, and the only way the state is going to know and the legislators are going to know this is if we bring it to their attention in the form of a resolution. So I would move to amend this resolution to, one, address specifically at the end of this year these three employees, and secondly, that the Human Services consider drafting a resolution urging the state to drop the consortium idea for this area.
Is there a second to that? Okay, there's a second. We need to, any more discussion? Supervisor Rose, could you reiterate what you spoke
2 points. One, that the Human Services Committee draft a resolution urging the state to release us from the consortium, and two, that we specifically address the need for the three economic support workers as set forth in this resolution at the end of 2012 or at budget time.
Put his mic on. Excuse me, what's your point, Supervisor Frederick? Could you state your point of order, please?
The motion suggests something different than the resolution. We're talking about approving positions, and now we're talking about adding an amendment so we can contact this. And I'm suggesting that the amendment is not germane to the resolution.
I want to ask Corp Counsel that question.
In my opinion, the idea and the part of the motion that asks to have the positions reconsidered at the end of the year 2012 or at budget time is germane to the question. In my opinion, the other part about asking the Human Services Committee to urge the state to release Kenosha County from the consortium is not germane to this motion. So the second part is probably should not be included, and the first part about ending the 3 employees at the end of the year or budget time should be included.
Does everybody understand what was just said there?
Yes.
Do you still second the motion, Supervisor Molinaro, with excluding the second portion of that?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion has been modified, and it's been seconded by Supervisor Molinaro. Is there any further discussion on?
You got to vote on modifying. You got to vote on modifying the main motion as set forth by Supervisor Rose.
Excuse me, we need to vote on the modification of the resolution that's been come forth from Supervisor Rose and seconded by Supervisor Molinaro. The maker of the motion, could you repeat the?
Sure. As suggested by the Corporation Council, I would move to specifically address the need for these 3 economic support workers, considering the budget, considering the necessity for them and the work that they do, either at budget time or at the end of the year at our option.
Thank you. Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
On the motion?
Yes, on the motion.
My understanding.
Motion to amend.
My understanding from Human Services is that it will take approximately 90 days to train these individuals. Plus, when you include the time it takes to post and hire these individuals, we won't even know, they won't even be up to speed by budget time, and we won't know their effectiveness by budget time. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Anybody else wishing to speak? Supervisor Skalitsky, you have the floor. Just give me a second. You're mic'd up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. As I had stated earlier, being considered or graded last place based on some arbitrary standard set by the state does not mean the citizens of Kenosha County are not being helped. Now, it may be that you're not able to answer the phone in 20 minutes or whatever the number is, or you can't handle 15 cases a day. I don't know what the standards are because I don't do that job. But let's not pretend that the citizens of Kenosha County are not being helped. They are. We're concerned about kind of business as usual from government. Let's just throw some more money at it to solve the problem, rather than looking at what the root of the problem is. Perhaps the process that's being used is not adequate. Perhaps the individuals aren't adequately trained, or perhaps it's a combination of both of those. But just arbitrarily, and to Supervisor Decker's point, getting 3 people hired, and I would concur, by the end of the year you might have them up and actually functioning. We're in the budget again. And now we've got a motion to amend this and say, well, we need to reevaluate at that particular time. Obviously, if I was supporting the resolution to move it back to committee to vet out some of these questions, I'm certainly not going to support the resolution as it stands right now. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Skalitsky. Supervisor Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Through the chair to Ms. Green, I would like to ask her the question of getting these people up to speed. Is this a 90-day training period? If she could comment on that for me, just in concurrence to Supervisor Decker's comments.
Ms. Green.
The training period could be approximately 60 to 90 days, correct?
So basically, you're telling me that we're going to have to post for this position, which could be, I don't know, 30 days potentially, and then 60 days before they're trained. So that's September, October, November, maybe even into December until they're up and running. potentially?
Potentially, that's correct. And generally speaking, the people who get these positions are internal people. We have not had an outside person in one of these positions in 10 years that I can think of. They post internally, either within the division or from another department in the county.
Okay, I get that, but in order to properly train them, it's still a 60-day lapse
Correct.
to 90 days, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Thank you, Supervisor Esposito. Who's next? Nobody? Okay, no further question or comment on the amendment posed by Supervisor Rose. Roll call's been requested. Yes, and if you're in favor of the amendment posed by Supervisor Rose, no if you're not in favor of the amendment. The motion fails. Now before you is the resolution as presented to you. Supervisor Arrington, you have the floor.
Is it on?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've sat and I've listened to us discuss the situation as it pertains to our constituents here in Kenosha County. I genuinely understand our concern as we are responsible for our budget, not only this year but for all the following years. My personal belief is that we owe and we are responsible to act as needed for our constituents here in Kenosha County. The bottom line is that we have people that are definitely in need of more service, and I understand that we're going to have to make even more difficult decisions when the budget time comes. But I want to support the resolution as it is right now because, to me, one family in need is one family too many, and we need to exercise this body to approve this resolution so that we can provide the service. And I don't know whether or not it has ever personally affected you as supervisors. I mean, I've dealt with some families outside of being a Kenosha County supervisor, and it affects these people, and I refer these people to these programs so that they can get help. And I just believe that that's what we owe the people. We owe the people the service as timely as we can give it to them. That's what we're here for. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Arrington. Supervisor Molinaro, you have the floor.
I've heard now from several that it is our responsibility to help our constituents who have a need. So at what point in time do we help the rest of the constituents who have asked us repeatedly not to continue to say, let's go ahead and add these 3 positions, add this pot of money, add this, do that, because pretty soon things are really going to get tough, and we're going to have to make some really difficult decisions with the upcoming budget. At some point in time, we have to recognize that our constituents are 166,000 or 160,000, I believe we have in Kenosha County now under the last census. At some point in time, we have to realize that the really difficult decision is today, tonight, on the county board floor. Not at some point in the future, not at the next budget, Not when we realize the deficit numbers before us are better or worse than they are this evening, but right now. And I've heard repeatedly from members of this very body recently, but more importantly from the public, who is saying something to the tune of $80 million spent in human services is really about all they can bear. And I'm not even questioning that at this point in time. I'm not questioning necessarily the need. I'm not questioning the impact it's going to have. Remember, the initial motion I made was simply to say, give me a better sense 30, 45, 60 days out from the budget of where we're going countywide with the budget. And then, quite honestly, I don't know how else to put this. The chairman of the board has the audacity to say the 2013 budget is a non-issue right now. In so many words. It isn't. It is real. I talked to several people in this room tonight who have said they've had conversations with the county executive about the budget. Well, if we're all having it piecemeal, or a number of us are having it piecemeal, I know the chairman is, it isn't some way off in the distant future, yet to be disclosed, having a clue what's coming isn't a topic of conversation. It couldn't be more real. So I say to you tonight, all those who we need to help are the same argument can be made, and the people that need to be helped are the ones who are saying enough is enough. And I'm only asking for enough to be enough for a pretty short window of time until I understand the totality of the pie. And I don't know why all of a sudden now the budget is just no big deal. I take it as a big deal every single day of the year, from the day it's passed to the very next budget. And when you're looking at a piece of paper like this before you, if it isn't in front of you, get it there. This is what we're talking about. Best case scenario, as of today, is $250,000. Worst case scenario is $2.1 million worth of deficit. If Mr. Poteni doesn't have a copy of this, I'll give it to him. This is the front page tomorrow. And I'm not questioning the discussion that we had or the information that was provided. I'm simply saying, give it 30 days, 60 days. Let's understand the bigger picture and who else is going to be asking for positions, and then whether or not we think we should be piecemealing 3 positions at a time until we're out of money. Or till we go from 2.1 to 2.5. I don't know what it's going to be. So if you want to do it, as I recall, on this 0% issue when the levy was before us, if that's the way you want to vote tonight, then by gosh, you better be able to atone for that vote when the time comes. Well, here you go. Here's another opportunity. The zero's there. So many on this board wanted. They wanted that zero to say to the very taxpayers I'm telling you today we should also help. They want to hold on these 3 positions for a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Kohlmeyer, you have the floor.
Chairman, I was also at the Finance Committee and had voted in favor of this resolution, very reluctantly as well. It sounds like a couple other supervisors. I do think this is a dire need from hearing the discussion at the committee level, hearing the discussion tonight. However, and the main reason at the committee level I voted to support it was because given the dire need of the positions, that they would have to cut somewhere else in order to achieve the 0%. However, given more thought, more debate tonight, these positions aren't going to be up and running until close to the end of the year. We should wait and see where all the pieces of the pie is coming so we can make sure we can balance this. And if this is, make sure this is important, that we can put these positions in at budget time and fund them. We're talking about delaying it maybe another 3 more months. But I do think this is a dire need, and we should serve our constituents if we are last. I mean, even if, regardless of if we're last I mean, we do have a duty to our citizens to serve them if this is a need, to your point. But I think the responsible thing in this situation would be to hold off on this tonight. Let's address this at the budget to make sure, and let's delay it 3 more months and get them on speed then to make sure that we can fund this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor Coleman. Supervisor Decker. Let's give it a second. There you go.
Yes, we need to serve the people that need help. I got elected to this board in 2010 during the recession. Obviously, we're still in the recession, maybe not in the technical term, but we're still in the recession. We're hiring, some people want to hire 3 more people. Now, I'm not against hiring 3 more people. I had more questions, and I wanted them answered. That's why I'm voting against this resolution. I cannot wait for the day that we are out of this recession and we can say our numbers of people in need are down. We don't need so many workers at the Human Services Department. I would like to see that day come, because it seems like we hire employees because of reason Y and reason X and reason Z, and we need those employees right now because of reason Y and X and Z. But when reason Y disappears, those people are still working for the county. When reason X disappears, those people are still working for the county. When we come out of this recession and these positions are not needed, I want to see these positions cut. Just like when the state comes in and is able to take over the jobs they said they were going to do, I want to see positions cut because the workload has been cut. I don't want our numbers reaching a level and then never going back down, even though the services we provide are going down. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Chairman Gens, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kubicki. You know, for a few months, I've let one of the supervisors here just jab me and jab me and jab me and try to get me to fly off the handle. Well, I'm not going to give him the satisfaction, but he's certainly not going to put words in my mouth. I didn't say that next year's budget is not pertinent or is not an issue, that type of thing. Okay, I'll tell you what I said. It's not the issue before us. Okay, helping our constituents, being number 10 on a list. These aren't made up, and these people do work. And our employees do a good job. We're struggling. So you could sit here and tell me all you want about what you want to do with next year's budget. Great. I look forward to those debates. And it is important. We're the board of directors of a $200+ million company. That is important. And I hope all of our constituents understand that. But right now, we have an issue. We have an issue that needs fixing. You can sugarcoat it or do whatever you want with it. Sending it back to committee is not the answer. We've had 2 huge debates on committee, a marathon debate tonight on it, and we've got the questions answered. We've got staff here. Okay? Now, to put it off 3 months and then wait another 3 months, well, what are our constituents going to be doing then? Calling and then expecting a phone call back the next day when they're in trouble? I mean, how long do you want to put it off? You know, whether you believe it or not, how often does Adelaide come to us and say she needs staff? I can't remember the last time. And especially with the deficit. I mean, she practically has to come in hovering down because she's embarrassed to ask for this help. We need to help our people. You can go on about next year's budget all you want, and it is important. Don't put words in my mouth and tell me I'm saying it's not important, because it is. But right now, that's not the issue before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Gens. Supervisor Rose.
When this issue came before the committee, the resolution before you was toward the top of the agenda. We did not have this general fund report that I asked the finance director to leave on your desk this evening. That came at the end of the meeting. At the end of the meeting, with the budget director and the finance director making their report, that's when we found out about expected deficits in the 2012 budget. The best case scenario is expected, and the negative outlook is even worse. So we didn't debate these issues together and say, well, we're going to support the resolution before you. That took place first, and then we found that there was going to be a big deficit, and I think in retrospect, had we known this, the debate might have been quite different. I think it is also well to note here that if you vote against the resolution this evening, people are still going to be served. Nobody's going to be deprived a single benefit that they are entitled to. We are complaining here about the telephone wait. Have you called AT&T recently? Have you called some other large organization or company recently and had to press 1 and press 2 and press 4 and 6 and if it's in English or Spanish or, you know, the list goes on and on. Have you tried to call Frederick Hospital? And you had to sit there and wait? I called a doctor's office today, not Dr. Montemuro, but another doctor's office for someone, and finally hung up after about 10 minutes, and I'm still waiting for the call back. This is not uncommon, and I'm not suggesting that it is good. But I am suggesting that it is common and that the service we are giving is not outrageously slow if you compare it to some of the other phone calls you have to make in everyday life. But I hope that no one goes away here this evening thinking that some blind person or some poor person or some disabled person is not going to be served that day if they are qualified for those benefits. That is what the debate is about this evening. All we are really suggesting to you is that we take a look at the big picture at budget time in a couple of months, that passing this resolution this evening, which isn't even effective until September, will not get those people on the job for months, and it won't be until after the budget in November is passed. There is no urgency here before you this evening. Let's take a look at the big picture, because the Finance Committee wasn't given the big picture in debating that resolution at the Finance meeting last week.
Is that all, Supervisor Rose? Thank you. Supervisor Montemuro, you have the floor.
I would just like to clarify, these positions also are cross-trained to do other things, correct? So even if the call center got a lot more efficient, they should still be busy people. And I seriously hope that we have these numbers re-looked at and brought back to us. I don't know if the Finance Committee saw the same numbers and the performance that we saw at our committee, but something from that standpoint has to be done. And if they're going to be cross-trained, they're still taking care of people. But I totally agree that if they're not necessary, then they need to be doing some other job in that department.
Thank you, Supervisor Montemuro. Supervisor Hallman, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I contemplated banging my head against the desk until something useful came out. I would like to, if I could, through the Vice Chair, to ask our Finance Director, Mr. Dave Gertzen, to come to the podium.
Mr. Gersten, would you come to the podium, please? Thank you.
Through the Vice Chair to Mr. Gertzen, earlier this evening you stated that the quote-unquote deficit in human services would end up almost breaking even. Could you please restate that to the board?
Yeah, based on the numbers that we see now, If you look at it in its totality, as I mentioned earlier, it looks like it'll come close to breaking even.
Could you share with the body exactly the details of how that might happen?
If we're looking at a surplus in health insurance, which we'll allocate back to Brookside and back to Fund 200 and 225, that is not figured into their deficit number currently. We're looking at a surplus in what we call indirect costs, which we vetted out in committee. That doesn't get allocated to Fund 200, but for Fund 200, that wouldn't be generated. And we're looking at a surplus in Brookside. So when you add all of those together, they come close to breaking even at this point.
I know we're not here to debate the budget, but I do want to point out that as part of Ms. Dave's report, she did say that there would potentially be the availability from other areas to make up the deficit. She did state that to the Human Services Committee, that she was presenting what right now looks to be a worst-case scenario. I also have a second question for the Finance Director, if he would come back. And I don't know that staff in the room have the availability to answer this question or not, but what are we spending in the current fiscal year on income maintenance?
What are we spending in income maintenance in total? Is that the question? Maybe
Yes,
I
sir.
could ask Mr. Wilson. We'd have to check the budget to see the total X millions of dollars on that. Sorry.
Well, thank you to Mr. Gertson. There is the possibility, and I'm going through some of the state papers here, which normally I don't do, but clearly there's the need to get into the weeds about policy tonight, so I fired up the laptop. Apparently, depending on what we are spending now, it very well could actually cost us more. And I say that because of the way that the state has this worded about income maintenance consortia. Basically, it says if you decide to opt out, if you fail to meet your requirements, the state will either hire other county staff to take over your caseload, or that they would hire state staff to do it, and actually contemplated including the W-2 program as part of this, as a later add-on. So they do say that if county fails to meet its commitments, that they would have to basically pay the money equivalent to what was paid in the 2009 fiscal year to the income maintenance program, and then they would hire whomever it is that they so choose to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hallman. Supervisor Harrington?
Yep.
It's on. You're on.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Through the Vice Chair to Ms. Green, I have a question.
Ms. Green, could you approach the podium, please?
Ms. Green, can you give us a forecast, potentially? I guess what I'm looking for is, in the event that these three positions would not be made available to you, can you give me a forecast? I mean, how would that impact your group?
I think we would have the same sorts of delays in service to the customers. We would struggle to answer the phones in the time frames that the state has suggested that we answer the calls. And the processing time would be beyond what's recommended by the state, and so people would get their benefits eventually, but they would be delayed. Adding these positions would help us not only to meet the performance standards, but to offer better customer service to the people that we serve. They are entitled to receive the benefits in a timely fashion, and because there are so many people in need out there, we're having issues getting cases processed in a timely fashion. So I think without these positions, we continue to be struggling with that.
How many, and I don't know if you even have this information, how many cases do you have right now?
As of July 1st, of this year, we have 20,440 cases, and there are between 1 and anywhere up to 10 people on those individual cases. Just depends on the family size.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Green.
Is that it? Supervisor John O'Day.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Maybe if Adelaide could maybe come up, I think she might be able to answer my questions.
Ms. Green, could you step back to the podium, please?
Was there any consideration given to purchasing from Goodwill or temp services the people that you need to do this kind of work?
Am I on?
Yes.
Income maintenance work can only be done by government employees, be they county or state. We cannot contract for income maintenance work.
And you made talked about call records starting in January 1st. Can you provide, I wasn't at the meeting last week, and can you provide the Finance Committee or the Human Services Committee with the call records, volume-wise, weekly, monthly, quarterly, something to get our hands around?
The information starting January 1 through the present time? Correct.
You know, something that I have to grasp.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
We were not in a consortia prior to January 1, and so I'd be comparing, if I gave you that information, I'd be giving you information just for Kenosha versus for the consortia. And so if you'd like information starting January 1 when the consortium went into effect, that might be more doable because the system that the state put in place allows us to track that sort of information. We weren't able to track it as individual counties before. And we do track it every single day. I've got lots of reports here, and that's why I asked how far back do you want to see the information?
Supervisor O'Day.
The past 6 months to a year, whatever you can come up with, it's without hiring extra people to find it. Okay. But at least 6 months, I would think. Yes. The other about the call center thing, my understanding was that Kenosha is picking up the phones for Racine. Is that correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor O'Day. Supervisor Noble, you have the floor.
Thank you. I never thought I'd be talking on this. The past two committees unanimously, we've discussed it now for 2 hours, and it's a levy-neutral resolution. I mean, I came in here prepared to vote for this 2 hours ago. I haven't heard anything to change my mind. It's a $50,000 resolution. We're going to get $25,000 worth of revenue, and we're going to decrease our cost by $25,000. It's levy neutral. How is this going to solve this budget gap if you don't do this? It's levy neutral. Honestly, I've been on the board over 20 years, and I've never seen supervisors flip-flop over a levy neutral resolution before. With, you know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I hope we come to an end on this fairly soon about everything that needs to be said is said. Let's vote it up or down and move on. We've got, the next two resolutions are some good news. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Molinaro, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. That could not have been a better lead-in. It is only levy neutral because we have $25,000 that was allocated in a very tight budget in 2012 that somehow is now available. That is not the reason I hit my light. This was, and this is even more to the point that was just made. Hypothetically, and you'll know when I make the point, this isn't so hypothetical. If this was the golf course asking for 3 employees and they had a $100,000 deficit, what would this board do? In fact, 9:30, we'd be thinking about ordering pizzas because we'd be here for a lot longer. Either that or it would have been shut down and referred back to committee when I made the initial motion. Yet somehow, we can be, and I'm going to, and Mr. Geertsen knows that I have, when he tells me something, I take it to the bank, time and time and time again. I don't recall the ability when this document was shared with us and we talked about the Human Services potential deficit, both the expected and or worst case scenario negative, that we had a solution for filling that gap on Thursday evening. And it could be that I simply didn't hear it, but I don't recall at all that that was discussed. It was there, it was projected, we understand that, but we certainly didn't have a pretty solid fill for that as we seem to have this evening. So that troubles me. But I guarantee you, if this was the golf course and they were looking at a fraction of this deficit, and they were asking for a half a position, or even worse, a $5,000 raise for some employee, this board would have shut it down before it got here. Yet now we're looking at anywhere from, I'm going to keep telling you the number, $600,000 to $750,000. And we're going to hire 3. And then we're going to say because they found the money in a tight budget somewhere, it's levy neutral. I've said from day one, if it's available, give it back to the taxpayer. Forget this levy neutral garbage. If it's $25,000 they don't need, give it back. That was the impetus for the general fund resolution that we currently have today, because I got tired of taking, and not giving it back. So I can't wait for something else to come forward. I can't wait for a discussion to come up on the golf courses. I'll replay the whole doggone tape of this discussion when that time comes. $5,000 was that discussion, and it wasn't adding a position. Now we're adding 3, we're calling it levy neutral, and we're looking at a $750,000 deficit. But it's not important tonight. What's important tonight is making sure the phone's answered. Well, there you go. Vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Rick Dodge, you have the floor.
Yes, I'll try to keep this short. I think we've spent a lot of time on it. I'm just grateful that we didn't have a 2.5% decrease in our levy, because we have enough problem with the 0% right now. I've tried to attend all the committee meetings and listen to all of the presentations. I was out of town last week. I missed the finance meeting. I have been in meetings, and I have heard the statement that I support our department heads all the time, whether it be a disciplinary meeting or whatever. But I'm going to say we've got a department head here that is telling us that they need this. They're telling us, yes, okay, we've shifted money in the budget, which I guess is done quite often, and we can accommodate the need on the budget to pay for this. We've got a department head. I would like to believe that if she needs a staff, she's not lying to us, but I would also like to believe that if the economy picks up and she doesn't need them, that she would lay them off. I'm going to support her request, and I hope we get on with this and get this meeting over with. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Dodge. Supervisor Ron Frederick, you have the floor.
Just for the record, I knew exactly what I was voting for to committee. I understood it clearly, and I'm supporting it now.
Thank you, Supervisor Frederick. Supervisor Montemaro, you have the floor.
Molinaro, because if this was the golf course and anybody in this room voted for it, we would look like pretty dumb people. But this is a total different department. The numbers show that they need our help. They're going to cross-train. This is idiot-proof. It's not costing us too much, and in my opinion, it's rude not to help these people. That's how I feel about it.
Thank you, Supervisor Montemaro. Anyone else? Anyone else wishing to speak on the resolution? Okay. Roll call has been requested on the resolution before you. Yes if you're in favor, no if you're not. The resolution fails.
No, it didn't. It passed. 11.
It's 2/3 majority to pass because it's a budget modification. So it's 2/3, so that's why it failed.
Resolution 41 from Public Works Facility and Finance Administration Committee, a resolution to approve the acceptance of grant funding for the purpose of funding the Pike River Fish Passage Dam Removal Bridge installation. Public Works Facility, Elverman, yes. Noble, yes. Dodge, yes. Nudo, yes. Skalitsky, yes. Finance Admin, Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Grady excused. Kohlmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Noble.
I move resolution number 41.
Resolution number 41 has been moved by Supervisor Noble, seconded by Supervisor Nudo. Supervisor Noble.
The Kenosha County Parks Division submitted a grant request through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for the Pike River Fish Passage Dam Removal and Bridge installation in Petrified Springs. The grant was awarded for $150,000, and it will allow for fish passes to the headwaters of the Pike River. Simply put, this resolution authorizes the general manager of the parks operation to act on behalf of the county and accept the grant of $150,000 to do the work.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion is... Oh. Supervisor Decker? Thank you, Supervisor Decker. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion's passed.
Resolution 42 from Public Works Facility and Finance Administration Committee regarding naming rights proposal for the Old Settlers Dog Park. Public Works, Elverman, yes. Noble, yes. Dodge, yes. Nudo, yes. Skalitsky, yes. Finance Administration, Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Grady excused. Kohlmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Noble.
I move resolution number 42.
Resolution 42 has been moved by Supervisor Noble, seconded by Supervisor Dodge. Supervisor Noble.
There is a dog park in Old Settlers Park. It actually happens to be the very first dog park that we opened up on a temporary basis a few years ago. And the Kenosha County Board agreed that non-levy monies, donations, and other user fees could be used to build and operate dog parks. The Kenosha County Executive made it known that for a donation of $12,500, naming rights may be granted to the individual organization making the donation. And Kenosha County resident Dr. William Harris is proposing to name to make a donation in the amount of $12,500 to secure the naming rights to the dog park located in Old Settlers Park. Again, this would authorize the General Manager of Parks through the Kenosha County Board to act on behalf of the county and accept the donation from Dr. William Harris and name the dog park in Old Settlers Park the Harris Family Dog Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Resolution 42 is before us. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution passes.
Possible closed session pursuant section 19.851G, conferring with legal counsel rendering advice concerning strategy to be adopted with respect to litigation, Kenosha County versus the City of Kenosha Health Department litigation.
Is there a motion to go into closed session? It's been moved by Supervisor O'Day, second by Supervisor Grady to go into closed session. Pardon me, Supervisor Rose? Yes.
This has been vetted and voted on at the, discussed and voted on at the Common Council last night. It's been approved to my understanding verbatim to what's before us this evening. There's no reason to go into closed session on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Rose?
I too would urge the board to remain in open session. I see nothing at this juncture that is particularly confidential that hasn't already been discussed rather openly, and also has been published in the newspaper. If you recall, the mayor and the county executive met for a press conference. There was a very large article about it in the newspaper. The Kenosha News today had an article about the city council passing it. I see really no reason here to go into closed session. I think it is a very rare situation where the county board as a public body ought to go into closed session. What is before you in this memo here is pretty clear, and I would urge that we remain in open session to debate this, and I'm going to urge that we pass it as we did in committee.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor O'Day?
No, not yet.
Seeing no more discussion, the motion before you is to go into closed session. Roll call is requested. Right, no, it's not. Okay, we will remain in open session.
Resolution 43 from Finance Administration Committee, a resolution to settle litigation between Kenosha County and the City of Kenosha over the Health Department contract. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day excused. Grady excused. Kohlmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Rose?
I would move resolution number 43.
Resolution number 43 has been moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Supervisor Ron Frederick. Supervisor Rose?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would urge the board this evening to adopt the settlement here that has been recommended by the county executive as well as our corporation council. I think it's very important to settle this dispute with the city, to put this issue behind us and to get on to the next subject. I think we all believe that we have a good case. No case is a perfect case. There's certainly no guarantee that we would prevail in this case. There are two sides to these kinds of issues, and that the settlement proposal that you have before you this evening is a reasonable one. There is a total cash settlement of some $380,524. The original amount that we were contending was owed was $551,000. So the $380,000 plus proposal, I think under the circumstances is a reasonable proposition. This kind of litigation could go on for years. I recognize there would be a trial probably in 2012. Appeals can take place. Reversals can result in remands to the circuit court. So just because this case might be litigated at the trial court level in 2012 doesn't mean that it would end for good. So I think there's a lot to be said for settlement. We are accepting a substantial cash settlement. We're saving the Corporation Counsel's office a good deal of time, as well as the input from other county employees, the time and energy of the county executive, as well as the city's time and energy in this type of litigation. Additionally, a settlement will make amends here. And I think it's important that even though we have these differences, that we settle these things and set those differences aside and proceed on to what is more productive projects of cooperation or our own government and the administration of the city government. So there are many, many reasons, I think, to settle this type of lawsuit and proceed with the idea that we should put this behind us and go on to the next issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Molinaro.
Just very quickly, county executive, the administration deserve recognition for staying the course on this issue. Former Corporation Counsel. Are we good?
Yeah, your mic's on.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering what, former Corporation Counsel Volpen Testa was, spent an awful lot of time on this issue over the years. Turn it over to current Corporation Counsel Vash, and at the end of the day, what I'm most pleased about is not only is this beneficial all the way around, county executive has thrown a number of issues against the wall over the many years we've debated this to see what may or may not stick, none of which I was supportive of, because they were all issues that were outside of the health department. At the end of the day, what's before you is a settlement based solely on the issues of the health department. We're not tying in facilities, we're not tying in roads, we're not tying anything into this final decision, and that both sides, the mayor, the county executive, are to be applauded. It is, as Supervisor Rose pointed out, it is time that we move this forward and get on to business, and I appreciate the efforts all the way around on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor John O'Day.
Call the question.
Been a motion made to call the question. Is there a second? It's been seconded to call the question. All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Noble.
I know that.
Okay. Roll call requested.
No, we gotta wait. We gotta wait. Not a man.
Yes, we are. We're voting on calling the question. Okay, the question is called and the debate is closed on the issue. Roll call is requested on the issue. Give us a minute to clear the board before we start pushing. Thank you. Resolution 43 you're voting on.
Now they can vote.
I don't think we can vote. I think you got to clear it.
She did clear it and started over.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's working now. 2/3.
Frederick, push the button.
There you go. You did it.
Resolution passes unanimously.
You did it.
Claims, 5 DC Schroeder car damage,
Refer all the claims after being read to Corporation Council.
6 Charles Schroeder Jr. car damage, 7 Zachary L. Polera denied medication while incarcerated. Approval of the August 7th, 2012 minutes by Supervisor Noble.
Supervisor Noble?
Minutes for August 7th, but I have one adjustment.
Pull it down.
I moved the minutes for August 7th, but I have one adjustment, where it says at the very end, time stamps reflect the digital recording. I'd like to add at kenoshacounty.org or whatever our website is, and then publish that in at the end of the minutes in every article, so that people understand when they read the minutes in the paper that that's what those time stamps are and where to go if they want to listen to it.
Okay, the minutes have been amended and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Point of interest,
Sure.
very distressing during the conversation with Ms. Green up here at the podium.
Did you push your button off, Bill?
Okay, you're on.
Oh, he shut it off.
Is it on?
He shut it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's very distressing to have a member at the podium and another member, or I should say a speaker at the podium, and a member of this assembly, this body, trying to speak back and forth in conversational tones. So if there's something being done to remedy that so that one mic doesn't have to go off, the next doesn't have to go on, you know, this is just a very basic thing and it needs to be addressed. So hopefully by the next meeting this can be taken care of.
Supervisor Grady, we do have them coming in to set up that on its own channel. I had that issue with Supervisor O'Day. There's 3 or 4 mics tied together, and that's why I couldn't have that. I had to judge by when a question was done being asked, so I understand that it was a problem. They are coming in to put that podium on its own circuit so that we won't have that issue in the past.
As long as it's being addressed, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as long as my mic's still on, and the same point, you have to speak into these microphones like you're a rock star. I don't know if we can get different microphones, but Mick Jagger would have a hard time being heard on these microphones.
I cannot hear him at all. The minutes have been approved. It's been moved by Supervisor Decker, seconded by Vice Chair Committee to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
They just need to